Construction explained. What risk actually means. In construction, the word risk gets used a lot, usually without being defined. We talk about risk in meetings. We talk about it in contracts. We talk about it when something goes wrong. But most of the time, no one actually stops to define what risk is. And when a word isn't clearly defined, it gets misused. Or worse, it gets ignored. So let's slow this down and be precise. Most people think risk means something going wrong. A mistake, a failure, a bad decision. That's not correct. Those are outcomes. Risk exists long before any of that happens. In fact, a project can be well-run, well-staffed, well-intentioned, and still be carrying significant risk. Risk is not a moral failure. It's not a sign that someone did something wrong. It's something else entirely. In construction, risk is uncertainty. Specifically, uncertainty that affects cost, time, or performance. That's it. Nothing dramatic. Nothing emotional. Risk is simply the gap between what we know and what we need to know to make reliable decisions. And that gap exists on every project. The problem isn't that risk exists. The problem is when we pretend it doesn't. This is an important point. Risk does not require chaos to exist. You can have competent people, good intentions, a clean site, a reasonable plan, and still have meaningful risk embedded in the project. Why? Because risk doesn't live in mistakes. It lives in assumptions. And assumptions are everywhere in construction. When risk is ignored, it doesn't disappear. It simply shows up later as change orders, delays, conflict, frustration, cost overruns, and when it shows up later, it's louder, more expensive, and harder to manage. The real problem isn't risk. The real problem is pretending there isn't any. Good teams don't try to eliminate risk. They don't panic about it either. They do three simple things. They name it. They locate it. They talk about it early. They understand that some risk can be priced. And some risk can't be priced. It has to be managed. Confusing those two is one of the most expensive mistakes in construction. Risk isn't a failure. It's information. And when it's treated that way, calmly, honestly, early, projects get easier. Not perfect, just clearer. And clarity is where good decisions begin. Conversations about risk tend to stay abstract. A checklist doesn't solve that. But it can make uncertainty visible early when it's still manageable. I've shared one if that's useful to you. Construction explained. Clear thinking before construction starts.